So not tomorrow. Okay, good morning. We are Hilchos Chol Hamoed Tav Kuf Lamed Zayin. One quick thing from yesterday where we spoke about the chickens, in case I misread it or translated. Aval very end with Dalit. Aval asur lahoshi v'acheret afilo meita harishon. So the first chicken you're allowed to put on there in that situation, but if it dies, you're not allowed to put another chicken. Then it's too much of a tircha, and that's asur. Okay. Now, for today, the focus of today is Davar Ha'aved, but I do want to discuss a quick intro, which is going to carry us through the rest of Davar Ha'aved, and a quick review of yesterday's discussion of being metakin for Davar Ha'aved. We can bring it up now or later, but we'll just do it now so that we see how it plays out. As we read the Simanim, you'll see how it keeps coming up. So, one issue about Davar Ha'aved was, what about Tircha Yasera? So if it was unclear, it is a little bit unclear. So, in the general rule, now it really depends on each case, how Chazal and the Mishnah or the Gemara was gozer or metakin, the way it should be. Obviously, later issues are a little bit less clear. But the general rule is, if it's a case of Davar Ha'aved, so we learned you're allowed to do Davar Ha'aved, even if it's for after the Chag, you're allowed to do it on Chol Hamoed, if it's a Davar Ha'aved, so it depends. Can you do it with the Tircha Yasera? A lot of work. Again, what does that mean? It's always a discussion. So the general rule is, if it's a Hefsid Meruba, you're going to lose a lot of money, and it's going to be a semi-disaster, whatever. Again, what is Hefsid Meruba? That's a whole other discussion. So if you're losing, for what it is, a decent amount, so then we say you're allowed to do a Tircha Yasera, you're allowed to spend a lot of effort. But in many of the cases we're going to see, if it's a small Hefsid, so then you're only allowed to do a small Tircha, not something that's too much effort. Okay, I know it's a little gray, what's called a Tircha and what's called a Hefsid. But that's at least the general rule to, you'll see it, the theme often, usually works out. Okay, something else that Moshe brought up was, we don't normally see in Chazal, the Poskim, the concept when it comes to Chol Hamoed, as we hear about a few other places, the makom tsar lo gazru be'rabanan. You don't usually use that expression. Now that it may be a little bit of semantics, but we often do basically see that. It's phrased in Chazal differently. We often see that Davar Ha'aved is mutter, Tzarech Ochel Nefesh is mutter, even Tzarech Haguf, we learned yesterday, is also considered for these purposes. Again, not for Yom Tov, but for Chol Hamoed, it's considered under the same heter as Ochel Nefesh, Tzarech Ochel Nefesh. So we could have used either terminology, but we see in the Poskim and Chazal, usually it's the Davar Ha'aved, Ochel Nefesh, Tzarech Hamoed, Choli.
Maybe because the Makom Tsar is a higher bar. Because all of these things,
I don't know. We have a case.
On Shabbos, but Makom Tsar goes even on Shabbos. So Makom Tsar, you don't need Makom Tsar on Chol Hamoed. But Vada, it's not there. All these other things.
Okay.
Are less.
Now I'll give you an example when it comes to milking a cow. So the Poskim point out we had this case already. I think in Lam and Gimel. It's they call it Davar Ha'aved. Now, it's not necessarily really Davar Ha'aved, but those are the words that Chazal like to use. You personally might like to use Tsar. That's not what Chazal and the Poskim use. No, not as the Tsar B'alei Chaim, but yeah, it's not under the heter Tsar B'alei Chaim, although that's also a reason why it's mutter. I'm just pointing out that there's certain Lashonos in Chazal and in the Poskim for Chol Hamoed. I don't say it's wrong to use the Makom Tsar, but those are the Lashonos that they use. And an Agmas Nefesh, also you don't see. Oh boy.
Low battery.
It's still going? Okay. The one last thing I'll just point out, I mentioned yesterday, the phrase of Agmas Nefesh, I've only seen that in very late Achronim, and not anywhere earlier, but it's just an extension. Okay, just wanted to point that out. Now, when it comes to, let's just run through a few very pertinent examples, halacha l'maisa, as far as davar ha'avid. So, or can things be fixed with an uman is really the question. Can things be fixed with an expert? So fixing glasses, this is more kosher to yesterday, but it's all connected. So fixing glasses with an uman, so there, I think all the poskim say it's mutter, you see that in Ber Moshe, Chazon Ovadia, and others. These are glasses that you need to see with. Glasses that are just for aesthetic reasons. So then we're going to see later on that by women you're allowed to fix things because for their jewelry and tachshitim. For men, maybe not. I don't know. Okay, kitchen appliances. Can you have an uman come fix? An expert technician come for you to fix kitchen appliances. So the poskim, I think they all say, and you can look in Shema Shabbos Kilchasa, Chazon Vadia, Pischei Tshuva, Shevet Levi, Ber Moshe. I believe everybody agrees. Since it's in the kitchen and it's related to Ochel Nefesh, everyone says there's no question whatsoever, 100% mutter. Okay? What about things that are not in the kitchen? Appliances, so something like air conditioning and heat. So nowadays I think all the poskim, didn't exist in the olden days, but I think all the poskim generally say it's mutter because it's under the same category as Ochel Nefesh, it's Tzarech HaGuf. Okay, and you'll see that in Shevet Levi, or Moshe, Rav Yashiv, and in Yalkut Yosef. Let's see. What about electricity? The same thing. Mutter. What about your phone doesn't work? So that's mixed opinions, and also people have different types of lives, different societies, and how important the phone is. So some say it's people are always needing the phone even for food. You have to tell someone what to buy, what you need, or people can't survive. Again, you want to get down to too much suffering. You want to call it sa'ar, he wants to call it agmas nefesh, and chazal it's usually davar ha'aved. So many poskim do allow fixing phones, such as the Ber Moshe, Yalkut, and Yalkut Yosef. But in Shemir Shabbos Kilchasa, there he writes, again, this was written a while ago, in Eretz Yisrael, if that means anything.
Yeah, that's talking about cell phone.
Any phones. They didn't make a distinction, but again, I'm just sharing with you a couple of the different poskim point out. So there, he basically writes phones are not allowed to fix in Shemir Shabbos, unless you know you need it for food. Or for a choli, sakana, issues like that. Things can always be a case of choli and sakana, but, so anyways, I think most would be makel for that as well. Let's say a washing machine. So there, so here it's a question. Some write, like in Shemir Shabbos Kilchasa and Shevet Levi, you're not allowed to fix it. But there are others who definitely say you're allowed to, because it's, many poskim would say you're allowed to also do it, a washing machine, because of davar aved, agmas nefesh, and you're allowed to do laundry for what you're allowed to do. So it's going to make you now have to spend more money, or uncomfortable situation with neighbors. We don't see that you have to go to, well, it depends. Some say we don't see that you have to go bother neighbors. Anyway, so we'll leave that as a question mark, but that's that. Okay, cars was asked yesterday. So, as far as cleaning, washing your car. So many people would say it's not a tircha to wash your car. You just do a quick drive-through. What's the big tircha? Or it's just like washing, could be like washing dishes. It's simple, it's relaxing. So in Yalkut Yosef it says it's mutter. But in Ber Moshe, I believe, in Hamoed, he writes that it's that it may be aser because it's a tircha. So I don't know. I guess that's that. Then easy things for a car. Even if to have a car mechanic do something that's easy, like I know it might be out of our comfort zone, but objectively it's an easy thing to do. such as changing the battery, changing the tire. Again, maybe you have to be a stronger person to do it. But for normal people, that's not called a Maisa Uman, most say. A puncher may or may not be, depending you ask. So if you look in the poskim, anyone that discusses it, so a lot of them start off by seeming to say that it's usher to fix a car, because if it's a Maisa Uman, unless it's a case where it's a Davar Ha'avid. Like, Shemar Shabbos only says it if you're stuck on the side of the road, and now you have to, what are you going to do? Leave your car there and take a taxi, so you have to for sure get a mechanic and get towed and all that. Then he has an extra phrase over there, it depends how you want to interpret it, but it could be the Shemar Shabbos and Piskei Tshuva. They say that L'maisa, you're not necessarily forced to stay home, and also it depends how you live in your society. Some people you can't function without a car, and you're not chayav to pay a taxi every time you get out of leave your house, go to shul, go to shopping, do anything during the day. So, depends how you read them, but it sounds like they're saying it is mutter. As Rav Pessin, he says for sure it's mutter. Rabbi David, Rav Rosner. So basically they all say, L'maisa, you're allowed to fix your car, because otherwise you can't function, and at the end of the day it's going to cause you a loss of money just to function. So, we'll say it depends on the tzarech. Obviously if you're sitting home, and you're not going anywhere, so then I think everyone would say it's aser.
Or if you don't want to go anywhere.
Or if you don't want to go anywhere.
Do any compare it to the horse that we saw in the last summer?
So the horse, we see...
In order to travel, you're allowed to even beautify the horse. You're allowed to give it a cold shower. You're allowed to fix the tires of the horse. You're allowed to car wash the horse. You're allowed to feed the horse. You're allowed to do all those things. And none of them compare it to a horse.
I don't recall any of them comparing it to a horse. No, it's very good. Is that talking about Maisa Uman? So we normally say a Maisa Uman you're not allowed to do unless it's a Davar Ha'avid. So the case of the horse is more L'tayel and L'tzorach Hamoed.
And none of those Maisa
And that's a question. If you apply that to Aleph by the case of the horse, so there's a question if that's allowed by Maisa Uman. So it seems to be it's Aser unless it's Davar Ha'avid. And to be trapped in your house or having to pay for a taxi, already, it seems like everyone calls that Davar Ha'avid, and therefore L'maisa, it seems that everyone is Meiko. Also by plumbing. Any basic plumbing is mutter, Shemar Shabbos Kachase, Yakut Yosef, Ber Moshe, Shlomo Zalman. In other words, you can't function. You have a leak, you're losing water. You can't function in the kitchen, your boiler, you don't have hot water to bathe or wash dishes. All that's going to be mutter, causing a smell. But to do anything that's not like a semi-emergency, anything that you don't really need, that you can wait, so then having a Maisa Uman could definitely, if there's no Davar Ha'avid, then that could be an Isser Darabana. Okay. So that is going to help us going forward. Fine. So now let's read inside. Tav Kuf Lamed Zayin. Aleph. Davar Ha'avid. Right? It's something that's you're going to have. It's going to get ruined, financial loss. Mutar la'asoto b'chol hamoed shel bilo shinoi. So you're allowed to do it without any kind of, even without any kind of a shinoi. Okay, we discussed tircha yasera or not, but you don't have to do a shinoi. That's clear. Miu b'chol ma de'efshar lahakel b'tircha yaser. So the Rama points out, and however you're doing it, try and do it as little tircha as possible. Okay. Now. Mishnah Berurah points out, what if, now, he points out, number one, everyone agrees, even if the hefsid is not going to be now, the hefsid is going to be after Chol Hamoed. For example, they point out, by a car. You're going to need your car, let's say, for work. Let's say you don't need your car for Chol Hamoed, but you need it for work the day after Yom Tov. And if you don't get it repaired today, it's going to cause you a loss of money after Yom Tov. So in all these cases, mutter. Davar Ha'avid applies even if the loss is going to be after the holiday. And what if you don't know if it's going to be a loss? It's a suffix. You don't know if this issue, you don't know if you're going to need your car, you don't know if this issue is going to lead to being ruined or not. So the Magen Avraham says 100% always you can be Meiko. When it comes to Davar Ha'avid, you have a suffix, you don't know, you're Meiko. The Chai Adam says that if you're not sure, then you have to use a non-Jew to do it for you. And the Mishnah Berurah basically says, well, if it's a real doubt, like a reasonable doubt, like it's reasonable to assume, again, how you judge that a little bit, but he says if it's normal that this might lead to a real loss, and it's not far-fetched, it could be makel 100%, even by the Jew, by himself, okay, that's like and he says, but whenever possible, do it betzina. Okay. Now, let's keep reading. Lefichach. So now we're talking about irrigating your field, your garden. Okay, so here Perush Haaretz Tzmeah. Beit Hashlachin is you have land, it's a field, and it's thirsty. It needs water. Now, if once you already started, again, I'm not an expert over here, but the situation that we're discussing over here, again, basically it's a relatively simple principle. If it's a davar ha'aved, it's mutter, and if you don't need to do it and you won't lose anything, just wait a few more days for the Yom Tov to pass, then watering is going to be asr. So here, the case is, you began to water it. And since you began to water it, if you just stop now for a week, then it's going to cause damage to your field. It won't grow properly, something's going to happen. So then, mutar l'hashkota. So then you are allowed to continue. Right? You lift up the irrigation, whatever holds the water, and you let it flow in through your irrigation canals. Since you began beforehand, if you don't let it continue, once you start the process, it's going to get ruined. That's the Beit HaShlachin that we're talking about. Aval sedei Baal, but if you have a field that this Beit Baal means it gets from the rain. Okay, so then she'ein mashkin ta'el hashpicha yoter. So when it gets enough water from the rain, you never need to water it. You only want to water it if you want to have it. It's going to be better for your produce. It'll be better for the field or whatever you're growing. So it's not an issue of davar ha'aved or hefsed. It's just an issue of you want to make it better. So then asur lahashkota. So you're not allowed to water it if it's only to make it better. The only time it's mutter is if there's going to be an element of davar ha'aved. Okay, right? We're doing a malacha of watering, and there's an issue of tircha. So bet afilu beveit hashlachin, even in beit hashlachin. So we only allow it if there's not going to be a great tircha. Right? You can't start digging and making canals and irrigation systems lechatchila on Chol Hamoed. It's okay. Kegon mina ma'ayan ben chadash ben yashan shehu mamshicho mashke. So you already have your irrigation or canals. And what are you doing? You're allowing the flow from this wellspring, the spring of water that's just coming on its own, you're allowed to use it. Now, you're allowed to use it even if, doesn't matter if it's old or new. The new situation is because maybe it'll fall apart. It's brand new, it was never used. And now the first time the water comes through it, it might ruin it. You might not be able to hold the water, and you're going to come to start digging and fixing. So we're not worried about that. We don't make exera. That you might come to fix it, or you might start now using a big buckets and start carrying. So we don't make that type of exera. So just allowing the mayan to flow, no problem. Aval, right, and this is a case when there's all these cases there's an element of davar ha'aved. Aval lo yidle v'yashke min abrecha u'mimei gshamim mekubatzim, but you're not allowed to start carrying buckets of water. That's called a tircha yisera. In order, to get it from, you have some kind of a brecha, what's the right word? Reservoir, a pool, whatever it is. So then, it doesn't matter where it comes from, even if rainwater that gathers. All these cases is carrying with buckets is asur mipnei shehu tarach gadol. That's too much effort, and that's not allowed. Okay, now just using your foot, the Mishnah Berurah points out, when it's mutter, that's okay. Let's say, just to kick it with your foot a little bit, or to make a little bit of, to move the barrier with your foot, that's not going to be a problem. The problem is using a bucket. And basically, if you have a mayan that's going, then it's mutter with your hands, with your feet to help it along, and but you can't use a bucket. And in the case of using a brecha, then it's always going to be asur, because then you might come to use a bucket. Afilu aruga achat chetzia gavoa v'chetzia namach. Now let's say you have a field and you have two different levels. One is higher, one is lower.
What is a patch?
Well, a patch. So then dolim mimakom namuch lahashkot makom gavoa. So then you are allowed to take it from the top one to the lower one. Right, you're not allowed to, because you're using a bucket. If it would just be by lifting up a little thing or just kicking a little something, that would be okay. But once you have to use a bucket, so then that's never allowed, even though they're next to each other and you're going from, even if you're going from up to down. Okay. Gimel. Neharat hamoshchim min ha'agamim. Mutar lahashkot mehem beit hashlachim b'moed. Now, if you have rivers that are flowing, or canals of flowing water, you're allowed to let them, again, we're talking about, there's an element of davar avid, you're allowed to let them continue to flow into your Beit HaShlachim, even a Chol Hamoed, v'hu shelo paska. Now we're talking about rivers that you're not afraid they're going to end. Like we had a case of a Mayan, rivers, where it doesn't dry up during the year, because then there's Xera, you might come, because you might think this month it's not going to dry up, or not during Chol Hamoed, but sometimes during the year it does, and it might empty out in the middle of Chol Hamoed, and then you're going to be all stressed, and you're going to come to use a bucket. So that's when it's asur. V'chen, right, so it's only v'hu shelo paska when it's mutter. V'chen habrechot she'amat hamayim overet b'neihem. Also, if you have these pools, and you have these little big canals, generally at least an amma by an amma, they pass through them. Mutter lahashkot mehen, you're allowed to let it to continue to flow. V'chen brecha shenatfa mi beit hashlachim v'adayin hi notefet. Also, as long as there's a pool and the water is still dripping from there, you assume, you don't have to worry, you assume that there's endless amounts, and you let it to keep coming. Right? All these cases are just a very minor tircha, and therefore for davar avid it's mutter. Mutter lahashkot mimena beit hashlachin acheret, and you're allowed to let it continue to another one, to another field. V'hu shelo pasak hamaya namashka beit hashlachin al-yona. As long as the original source is constantly based, as far as you know, there's an endless supply. And that's when it's mutter. Okay, Daled. Yirakot shirotze la'ochlan b'moed. Now, you have vegetables that you want to eat on moed. It's l'tzorach hamoed. Either it's for you want to eat them, or you want to give it to your friend, or you have a makolet and you want to sell to other people. If it's l'tzorach hamoed, to be eaten and sold on moed, yachol lidlot mayim hashkotan. You're allowed to carry heavy buckets of water in order to water them, so that they'll be ready for the moed. Right? We're talking about a 7-day holiday, and if you water it for 2 more days, then when you pluck it, it's going to be that much better. So since it's tzorach ochel nefesh, you're allowed to do a tircha yasera. It's 100% asar, even without a delete, without a bucket. That's if you're only going to use it for after the moed, and there won't be davar hafsed. You're only doing it only to make it better. Just a quick word, we'll stop with watering a garden or a field or irrigation. So then so we learned, if it's not letzarach hamoed in your garden or field, so it's going to be asr no matter what, basically, unless there's going to be a hefsed, kilkel. Now, if it's just going to wither a little bit, wilt a little bit for a couple days, and it'll come right back when you water it, I don't think anyone calls that kilkel or hefsed. But if it's irreversible, then that's a problem. Then that's called a hefsed. Now, if you have a timer set, I don't think anyone says there's any isser, because you're not doing anything. It's all being done by a timer. And what about turning? For sure, we're talking about Chol Hamoed. Okay. Well, now, okay. Then, as far as turning on and off an irrigation system, so then nowadays, I think all the poskim say it's mutter. You can see Kaf Chaim, the Mabit, Chazon Ish, Chazon Ovadia, Pischei Tshuva, it seems to be that everyone says it's mutter. There's no tircha whatsoever, just by turning on an irrigation system. Again, we're talking about where there's at least a little bit of a davar ha'aved. We're not talking about just to make it better. If it's just to make it better, we learned that's aser. And it could very well be just using a hose also is the same 100% mutter, because there's no tircha, you're not carrying anything, and that's what it seems like. Alright.